I wanted to get to a little bit more about, who you are and how you came into the online space. I know from hearing about, your posts online, because I've been following you for a number of years. And I know from hearing about your other posts online that you were sort of a lurker in various online communities for a long time. And then at some point decided to, create this persona and start putting your writing out under that name. What made you decide to sort of want to start building out an online persona? And did you know that you wanted to be anonymous from the beginning?
Always knew that I wanted anonymity. I never set out to be a character or a person in this space. I just, I found it interesting. Do you remember a really old website called grouphug.us? It
No.
was sort of a brief, well, it was a small social media network that was probably alive for less than a year. And you could only be anonymous. And you didn't have to make an account. You just went onto the site. There was a text box and you could write your anonymous confession and people just upvote it and share it. And so people would just say what they wanted. They just did off their chest. And it could be, really, really mundane stuff. Like I took $1, from like that I shouldn't, like I stole someone's money, simple stuff, people confessing sexual infidelity, things that aren't even, some things that weren't even, bad at all. Just like I had an extra slice of ham on my sandwich, anything, it could be anything. And so to me, when I first made a Twitter account, there were some of these people I followed, people like Nick Land, or at the time, Bronze Age Pervert was not even a name. No one really knew who he was. I just, I made an anonymous account and I sort of treated it like grouphug.us. It was a confession box, an anonymous confession box. And so I just started saying really whatever I wanted and, didn't get any attention for it. I wasn't preaching. I wasn't speaking my truth, as they say, but I did like writing fiction. So I kind of toiled with no expectation of anyone reading my work at all. I just wrote a story because I wanted to write a story, because I thought it was interesting to me personally, because I was seeing all these things online and I wanted to incorporate them into some kind of a narrative. And that turned into the gig economy. And so I posted it there, I was at the gym. I remember this very clearly. I had worked on the story for about almost a year. Sent it to a couple of my friends, who knew me, my name, my face, and everything. And they said, "Hey, this is really good, actually." And they were surprised. I was surprised that they thought it was good. I posted it to my 50 followers. Made a tweet between sets. I don't know what I was doing, probably deadlift or something, and didn't think anything of it. And then suddenly, like that weekend, my phone just nonstop vibrating from the Twitter notifications. This was before they grouped them all together. So every single like, every retweet, every comment was like its own notification. Mm-hmm. And the phone just didn't, I had to put it on silent. And it was crazy. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Funny, because I had written about it in the story, never having experienced it. And suddenly I had thousands of followers in one weekend. And people were like, the story went viral. Eliezer Yudkowsky tweeted it with some disclaimer like, "Oh, even a neo-reactionary can write something good, but he's so horrible," that kind of thing.
Sure. So I remember reading The Gig Economy myself a while back. I don't know if I was reading it right when it came out or sometime afterwards, or what exactly the timeline there was, but I do remember reading it and it having an impression on me. For those who haven't read The Gig Economy, do you want to give the audience just a brief rundown on kind of the main ideas and theme in the story?
Yeah, so it's a story ultimately about the techno capital singularity. And at the time that I wrote it, Bitcoin I started when Bitcoin was in its first really crazy bull market, and it went up to, what was it, like $19,000 a coin in January of 2017 before it took a dive. Ethereum peaked around, I want to say, like 1,700 per token. So all the altcoins and shitcoins were pumping, and everyone was just in this mind of like, wow, the machine is rising, the global system of capital is renewing itself, and at the time, except so a lot of people were talking about techno capital and this kind of like right-wing Marxism. So I incorporated a lot of those ideas. And the basic idea of accelerationism is that capital functions like a machine, that it continuously reorganizes the world for the multiplication and propagation of itself, and that it will reorganize society and produce machines which are ultimately capable of playing the market and expanding it better than humans are. And accelerationism views this as relatively inevitable. So I was inspired by that kind of philosophy that I was seeing online. I was inspired by the guy who made Primer. I always forget his name. He had this brilliant script for a movie that was never made called A Topiary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of about this interstellar paperclip maximizer. And that was really a source of inspiration to me as well, and Borges and all the usual stuff. So in the story, there is an emergent artificial intelligence living on some blockchain. It's not really specified what blockchain it is, that's computing itself publicly across the world in all of these exchanges of tokens, and that it starts giving people jobs to do, little jobs to sort of grow out its sensory awareness of the world and to manipulate the course of human events. And then in the sort of ultimate reveal, we find out that this AI actually came from outer space, from some distant star, and wormed its way through history. It was part of, there's a tie into the Tower of Babel. It sounds very strange when I explain it this way, but it all sort of comes together into this Lovecraftian pastiche.
Yes. So I think that's a good place to then get into kind of one of the core themes around your account, which is obviously HP Lovecraft himself. And you call yourself a horrorist, and what you mean by that is actually something very particular. What you're writing is more along the lines of like sci-fi horror, right? And it's interesting to me because the kinds of horrors you confront in your writing that's sort of influenced by this accelerationist paradigm are these very impersonal and almost uncanny like machinations, right? That are sort of beyond us or almost godlike to us. This is, you can see sort of the Lovecraftian influence there. And it's not like how do you think that the future of sci-fi is limited to these sort of horroristic incantations, or do you or is there some sort of positive vision of the future? And do you think that the former is part of like an effect of our own feelings of alienation and misunderstanding in terms of the situatedness that we feel that we're in relation to these technological tools? One of the things that I was thinking about, I had a conversation the other week with Nina Power on Ivan Illich. He's sort of a left-wing Catholic anarchist, and he has this notion of tools for conviviality, which essentially, I haven't read the book, but essentially the essential idea is basically how do we go from tools using us to us using tools. So it's sort of a backwards looking kind of frame of things, and he was sort of a traditionalist. But what I see in a lot of your writing and in sort of the themes more generally that come out of it is this sort of feeling that it's the technology itself that is kind of taking on this monstrous character and is having an influence over us that is not both not in our control, but also not entirely intelligible to us. Is that how you conceptualize technology and its experience to contemporary people, particularly those who are maybe not as technically inclined, that it's some sort of outside, larger than life entity, and that there are sort of all these kinds of horrors in wait for us behind them?
Uh, so I've been thinking about this exact question quite a bit lately, and I sort of zoom in on a particular phrase you said, which was a positive vision. And I'd really like to know the provenance of this phrase, because you hear it all the time from many different people that say it's not enough to criticize, you have to express a positive vision. And so I think many people are looking for a positive vision, and some people will say of someone like me, like that I don't have one, which is probably probably true. I'm thinking a lot about what no one really knows what a positive vision looks like, and I'm actually writing sort of an essay on this topic quite a bit. I've been influenced quite by Peter Thiel,
Yes.
who talks about this. He points out that really too many people who are fond of technology right now. Overall, he points out how in, like, say, the 60s, there were still these kind of utopian visions of the world being better through technology. Everyone's healthier and happier and more productive. You look at even something like the Jetsons, everyone kind of lives in space and everything is super convenient, but for some reason there's no, like, their frictions and their tensions in life are just trivialities. They're sort of the last men. And they, obviously the Jetsons is a kid show, they're not going to wrestle with that. There's a sort of a fan canon that says that the Flintstones and the Jetsons are happening at the same time, and the Jetsons are up above, and the Flintstones are down below on Earth, like, and it's actually this dystopian world. And I think that's really telling. It's the only way we can make sense of something like that now, looking back in 21. Like, there's no way that people are just content with that. There has to be an under and a lower class. There has to be exploitation. There has to be something going on there. But so the really, to go back to your question a little, the sort of key thing we're trying to ask here is, like, is a technological utopia possible in any way? Like, does every technology we make just curl like a monkey's paw? Does it always come back to bite us? And I've been looking for cases, for examples of a technology that hasn't done that. You know, we look at, like, medical technology, things like, okay, penicillin, that seems to be pretty much an unalloyed good. It's really, really hard for me to find a way that penicillin makes the world a dystopia. So that one's probably best. Although you could argue that penicillin has freed up people to behave in very sexually promiscuous ways that maybe they couldn't have prior to that discovery. And maybe it does degrade our social fabric. Maybe just knowing that, you know, if I sleep around, I can go get an injection in my dick and not die of syphilis. Maybe that's a really bad thing for society, even if it's really good for every individual. So there's sort of, I think back then, when a lot of these industrial technologies like plastics and, you know, new medicines and agricultural methods, there's something called the second green revolution, when we figured out how to, like, you know, 100x the food output of a plot of land through fertilizers and pesticides and various other techniques. It's like but that precipitated the obesity epidemic, right? So every single good advance that we look at and say, all right, we have this amazing achievement, I guess it's progress, we can also point to all these horrible trade-offs. And we can no longer look at these at our technological advances without considering their dark trade-offs. And so all I really do is I look at technologies that are emerging now, things that are honestly pretty cool and exciting. Like Neuralink is an amazing idea in some sense, right? So is augmented reality, so is cryptocurrency. But every single one of those things, we can also look at all of the downsides, and we can project the worst excesses of their downsides. And it makes it really hard to be a techno optimist in this day and age.